So hello and welcome to everybody joining us today for this format photo forum with Niamh Treacy and Camilla Brown. We're just going to wait a little while for people to join us and the talk will start at 3 p.m. But in the meantime, it'd be lovely to know where people are joining from. So if you're on Zoom, there is a chat feature. And in the chat, if you could just pop where you're watching us from today, that'd be wonderful, just so we know who's out there. And then in that, if you could just make sure you send it to all panelists and attendees so that people can see the comments coming in whilst they're being made. You can see there's 14 people watching, so oh, fantastic, thank you, Claire. Great to see you've got someone locally in Wirksworth in Derbyshire. And in Nuneaton, that's nice to know. It'd be great to hear where everybody else is coming from. And I guess this is a good time to mention as well, Camilla is going to be speaking about preparing your portfolio for review. If you have any questions, there is on Zoom a Q&A feature. If you just pop your question within that feature, then we'll be able to kind of get those questions as they're coming in, and if they feel really relevant to what's being presented, I can jump in and talk with Camilla and Niamh and just, you know, let them know about the question. But if it can wait to the end, there will be a Q&A section, so we can always hold off till then. Oh, thank you, Veronica in Suffolk. It's nice to know. Yeah.
Veronica and Karen and Claire, if you could just change your settings to all panelists and attendees so everyone can see where you're from and join in the conversation. But yeah, hello to everyone. We're live on Facebook as well. We've currently got 18 people over there, which is good.
Yeah. This is the sixth digitised format photo forum. We will be having portfolio reviews on Saturday the 18th of July, so next Saturday, and then on Tuesday the 21st we will be coming back to these events. We're having a 1-week break. That will be with Peter Burnell and Simon Roberts, and we'll be sharing details about that soon, so just keep an eye out on our social media channels. So we've got 23 people joining us over here on Zoom. What about on Facebook? Let's have a look.
If you're just joining us, please let us know in the chat function where you're from. We've got a few local people. We've had people in previous talks from Australia and New York, so it's really nice to see how far we're reaching. Ooh. Hazel is in Lincoln and Sarah is in Derbyshire.
So we're live on Facebook. So the video can be found on the event page, can't it, Niamh?
Yes, no, on the Facebook page, format Facebook page.
Great.
So if you know anyone else that wants to tune in, yeah, it's on the format Facebook page. All over on the live stream, we've got someone from Israel, Derby, Monmouthshire, Northumbria,
Bristol.
I recognise a few names of people that will be joining the portfolio reviews next week, so thank you for tuning in. Camilla is obviously one of our reviewers on the day.
So just this is just again for anyone just joining in now, for a few new people click in kind of. So just if you do want to send any messages, just make sure you address it to all panelists and attendees so everyone can see where you're coming from, any comments that you have throughout the talk, and the same applies to the Q&A feature as well. Got someone from Argentina. Hello, Sylvia.
Amazing. Oh, Indonesia as well over on Facebook. Hello, Anton. I hope it's not too late. Not sure what the time difference is in some countries.
Yeah. This is the great thing about everything kind of moving online at the moment, is just this kind of, we wouldn't have this if it was in Derby.
No, I know, it's really amazing, and I think this it's really going to change things going forward. how everyone needs to think about how we have these events in future. Oh, so hello Jenna in Nottingham and Andrew in Wales over on Facebook. We've got 28 attendees. So yeah, we're going to go live. We're going to start the talk at 3. We're just going to wait until a few more people are joining. We do usually get a bit of a flurry at bang on 3.
So yeah, if everyone that's joining, yeah, just pop where you're coming from in the comments section. I can see new people joining, so don't be shy. Let us know.
And if you know you might already have some questions, get them ready. You can put those in the Q&A function, and we'll raise them at the correct time. I hope there's lots of questions for this talk. Oh, hi Tanya from the south of Ireland.
You can let us know, you know, what the weather's like where you are in Derby. It's raining and wet at the moment. We've said goodbye to all that beautiful sunshine. It'd be nice to know what it's like where you are. Joys of digital world. Oh, from Kevin, it's a wet dog after a walk in the park. Oh no. Well, I'm glad you're here with us. Thank you for joining. I'm sure you just want a cup of tea and some warmth, but this will be a really great conversation. Oh no, raining like the depths of winter here from Tanya. Oh, I know. Is this really July? Is this really July? Come on.
Oh, Ada, hi from El Paso over on Facebook. Raining here in Cheshire from Sarah on Zoom. It seems like everyone has transitioned into winter quite quickly here in the UK.
Oh, overcast, a bit rainy.
Oh, from Kevin, how's Quad doing? So for those who don't know, Quad is our HQ, well, where Format is run from, and Quad is a gallery based in Derby, which me and Laura work from. We're doing well, all the staff are doing well. It's hard times for everyone at the moment, but yeah, it's nice that we're keeping going.
Yeah. We have a large digital program at the moment, which can all be found about through our website and our newsletter as well. So.
Cool. Okay, a couple of more minutes and we will get started with Camilla.
So just say again one last time before we get the kind of discussion underway. If you have any questions, oh, hello from Paris, that's great. If you have any questions, please pop them into the Q&A section. I'll be keeping an eye on those. And I can always kind of join the conversation at an appropriate moment if it feels really relevant, but otherwise I'll wait till the end and we can review the questions. And similarly, I'll be keeping an eye on the comments section, so if it's similarly I can always jump in, but we can always look back at the end as well. So yeah.
And there's a couple of people with raised hands. Hello, if you do have any specific questions, please put them in the Q&A, and yeah, we'll get those answered throughout the talk. But if you're just saying hello, hello. And yeah, please try out the chat function if you haven't already.
Hello to Jodie.
Malcolm Dixon, hello over on Facebook. Tropical heat wave in Glasgow apparently.
Hello Malcolm.
Is that true? It would be very nice if we had that here. Okay.
Got close to 100 people watching us. That's brilliant.
That's great.
Hello to someone watching from London.
Brilliant. We've got 38 watchers over on Facebook at the moment. Facebook, our live streams seem to be a really popular option, which is nice to know how people want to access the talks and what they prefer. Oh, greetings from Belgium over on Facebook.
And hello from Paris over here on Zoom.
Brilliant. Oh, some familiar names popping up, which is great. Quite a few people that will be attending the portfolio reviews. So I really hope this talk is going to be useful for you. I'm sure it will be. Hopefully we can answer lots of questions for you and give you a bit more insight. If you haven't, maybe you've had a portfolio review before, or maybe you haven't. We're going to launch some polls in a second, just asking a few questions from you all.
Hello from Rome and London. It's great. So nice to see so many people watching from all over the world. It's really nice to have you here with us. Niamh and Camilla are all in rainy Derby. So it's great to be saying hello to people from so many different places.
Yeah. Oh, hello from Portugal over on Facebook as well. Birmingham, it's mine and Laura's hometowns. Oh, hello from Hunton Bridge in Hertfordshire.
Okay, so we've already got some questions coming in, which is fantastic. Thank you. This is great to have some interaction. So some of these questions are going to be more relevant towards the end of the discussion, and I can ask Camilla and Niamh these at the end. And so one person's also put, can you talk a bit louder? So we will. Sorry about that, Dennis. And yeah, that's great to know those sorts of things. We want you to be, hear us and enjoy this. So yes, I'll go quiet now. Oh, hello to Abby in Derby, neighbour.
And West Oxfordshire, Worthing. Okay, so we've got 67 attendees over in Facebook and 49 over in Facebook and 67 over in Zoom. That's really good. So I think we will get started now. I'm sure people will join over the next few minutes, but yeah.
Okay, I'll leave you guys to it then, and I'll be watching the comments and the Q&A for those who are saying hello there.
Great, thank you, Laura.
Thank you. So I'm Niamh, I am the format coordinator, and I am going to be talking to Camilla today about how to prepare your portfolio for digital reviews. It's obviously something that is becoming more important at the moment in the current circumstances. So Camilla Brown is a curator, writer and lecturer on contemporary art and specialising in photography. She is based in Derbyshire, as are we. For 10 years, she was a senior curator at the Photographers Gallery in London, and previous to that, she was Exhibitions Curator at Tate Liverpool. So I am now going to launch some polls for our viewers, just to ask a few questions and just get an idea of our viewers' experiences with portfolio reviews. So I'm going to launch the first one, which is asking, have you participated in a portfolio review before? So this should pop on your screens, and yeah, if you can answer. Ooh, lots of votes very quickly. So never is currently leading with 49%. Yes, I have participated in a portfolio review in the UK, and yes, somewhere else in the world. So it's interesting to see that people are attending portfolio reviews outside the UK. Oh, so never and yes in the UK is joint, really. So we've got a real mixed bag of viewers. So that's good to know. So I'm going to end that one and share the results so you can all see those. Camilla, can you see those?
Yeah, I can. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's really good. So quite a few that haven't ever attended a portfolio review. Maybe after this it's something you're interested in, or maybe something you want to do in future, or you just haven't felt ready yet.
Or it could also be people who are coming from different disciplines, because it's very specific for everything, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, there's quite a few people in the art world that don't necessarily practice photography, that don't even really know what a portfolio review is. So yeah, it is definitely very specific, but hopefully this will describe to you why they're really important and really great. So I'm going to launch a second poll now about online reviews. So this one's just asking if you've ever done an online portfolio review before. Okay. Oh, no is currently winning. They are something that I suppose a few places do hold online portfolio reviews, but they are something that's kind of, again, as I said before, a lot more relevant at the moment. Okay. Got 92% of people voted. 5 people haven't voted yet. If you want to put in your votes now.
Is there a prize, Niamh?
Maybe we should have done that. Unfortunately, there's not. The first person to vote. Okay, I'll end that one now. So no one with that one. So online portfolio reviews aren't a big thing from everyone. But if you have, 16 people have, so maybe in the comments section it'd be interesting to know what online portfolio reviews you have participated in before. Yeah, if you could put that into the chat function, that'd be interesting, and maybe make other people aware of ones that are out there. Okay, and I'm going to launch one last one. Who is coming to the Format 20 portfolio reviews next week on the 18th? I definitely know there's a few people here that are. I also put an answer in there about people that didn't know about them. So this is a good chance to make you aware of the Format portfolio reviews. They happen every year during our off year and during our festival. Yeah, we have international reviewers from all over the world. So it's a really good chance to have your work seen. Camilla is one of our reviewers this time and has reviewed many times before for us.
Too many times.
So, okay, I'm going to end that one. So again, no is winning. So it's nice to know that there's quite a few people attending that portfolio reviews are new to them. And yeah, hopefully we can give you some tips for the future. 24 people said yes, they're coming, so that's great. I'm glad you're here. And 10 said you didn't know about them, so hopefully you do now. And yeah, keep an eye on all our newsletters, and we're always posting about when booking opens for the new ones. Okay, so I think we'll get started.
Brilliant. Well, what we're going to do is hopefully keep this quite conversational and discursive. What I started to do when we were first brainstorming, I'm on the steering group for the Format Photo Festival, which is great to be part of. And when we were talking about the fact that we were going to move to do this online, and the team wanted to try that, I was thinking about that different context for people to show their work. And I do quite a lot of work for Lens Culture, an online website where people can submit work. And there's been a process of doing online reviews of people's work from that for some time. I've been doing that for about 4 years now. So that's probably my main experience of this before lockdown, was how I looked and viewed and responded to work online for Lens Culture. So I had some sort of insights and thoughts about what worked well digitally and online and what you miss in that presentation of work. And I started to develop some tips for students. I teach on a couple of courses, BA at Middlesex, MA at Derby. Felt it was helpful for students' professional development to kind of think about those different contexts. And I guess as a curator, the main thing is all about context. And Niamh, you're a great young curator yourself, but curating is a lot about editing and contextualization, isn't it? Every space is different, every site is different. And I think any curator would say you have to edit things according to that context and recognize the strengths and the weaknesses of each platform that you show your work on and try and make the most of those opportunities. So we felt it would be helpful ahead of portfolio reviews going online for Format to have a brief discussion about some tips and insights into how you might approach this. This isn't textbook, this isn't a set of rules, it's quite subjective in many ways, but it's just things to consider and things to think about. So we hope it is going to be helpful for you all. And Niamh will hopefully chip in whenever she needs to as we go through the slides. So I've got a presentation. I can share with you an online portfolio that one of the Middlesex University students has agreed that I can show. because my BA students at Middlesex, we all had to do online portfolio reviews a couple of weeks ago, and their show is online, and they all pre-prepared a digital portfolio. But Niamh will talk in more detail about what's required for format, because it's a slightly different format.
Yeah.
Presentation platform, isn't it? So it will be different according to where you're doing it, but I can share that portfolio with you because I thought it looked really good. It's very happy for me to do that. So we'll see how the discussion goes, and if it's helpful, I'll bring that up as well. So on to the first slide. What is a portfolio review? As I said earlier, if you come from a fine art background, you'll be scratching your head a bit on this one. I guess when I was curating at Tate Liverpool, the equivalent to a portfolio review was a studio visit. And it was a curator going to see an artist's work in their space. But obviously for photographers and for video artists, that doesn't really work. So in the photography world, they have this thing called portfolio reviews. And I, as a curator, absolutely love it because it's quite specific to the media. And it's a great experience usually. And it's very sociable, and a lot of people get together and you show your work. And you get that opportunity for some feedback and some critical dialogue about your practice, which once you've stopped being a student, you go out into the big bad world. It's very, very difficult to get that conversation around your practice. So a portfolio review is essentially meetings with curators and editors. What's great about this is that organisations like Format and Quad have access to a notebook of contacts. They're able to get very good high profile curators that you would struggle to get meetings with face to face. People give their time and do it as part of being part of the community. And therefore you have access to people in a really interesting way that they are happy to speak to you and for you to ask them questions. And it's rare to get that kind of access, isn't it, to those sorts of people. So be aware of that that's part of the process, isn't just showing you work, but you also get a chance to ask them questions about their career path, about what they like and what they look for in work. And you really get that understanding, I think, you can get that understanding of what each of these different professionals is looking for. And I think once you understand that and what they're looking for and how they want to see work, that's a real big hurdle to overcome and will make it much more constructive for you. So it's a discursive platform. It's a chat about the work, your work and things you're working on. Outcomes are always very hard to predict. It's best not to go in with a set idea of what you want the outcome to be. So here's an example. I worked at the photographer's gallery. People would come and see me for a portfolio review and they would want a show. They'd want an exhibition. But the chances of me giving them a solo exhibition at the photographer's gallery was very, very slim. You know, there were very few solo shows at the photographer's gallery anyway, 1 or 2 a year. There was a very long queue of people we wanted to work with. It was very unlikely that from a portfolio review you were going to get an exhibition. And if someone comes into the portfolio review with that expectation, you're almost having to handle that disappointment for them as a reviewer because you can't give them the outcome that they want. So it's best to be much more, it's just an intro, it's a conversation. It's wonderful if you have an outcome, but you won't necessarily know what that is for some time. And curators like myself and Niamh and other people who'll be looking at your work, you know, we might be asked to recommend the best people we saw in the portfolio review. We might be asked by a publisher, who did you see that was really good? It's often those softer connections where you can forward work on to people that might be an outcome. You might not know where that comes from. I might be on a jury for something, I might be on a panel for something, and I'll recognise your work. So it's very cumulative, I think, the way that you can get this visual awareness of your work, and it's difficult to know what the outcome will be. And obviously it's also a chance for you to talk about your work. I love that. I love the fact that you, as an artist, get the opportunity to say what you want to say about your work. It's your story, it's your version. You know, you don't have to fit any preconceptions of how you want to talk about your work. It's your opportunity. And actually it's lovely to meet an artist in that context and to hear them talk about their work. It's a nice experience for a reviewer as well. And I guess what you also get is that critical context for your practice. So people like myself and the other reviewers, we are looking at a lot of work all the time. You know, we're saturated in visual images. And what that means is we can offer a particular perspective on your practice. What I would tend to do, which may be annoying for some people, is refer to other contemporary artists who I know are doing work of a similar subject, because it's quite important to know who those people are. If you're not aware of who those practitioners are, you need to be. But I think that's one of the things that we can offer you, is just that very broad perspective of looking at an awful lot of work and then positioning your work within that. So that is one of the helpful outcomes. So Niamh, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add on that.
Yeah, I think, with knowing your outcomes, I think it's really important to say with portfolio reviews and open calls in the industry that even if you don't win an open call, or if you don't get a solo show out of a portfolio review, which is unlikely, it's just a real good chance for your work to be seen and your name to be known. Because like you said, I think a lot of curators and a lot of professionals, they'll remember those, and if something comes up and they remember your work from a previous portfolio review, whether it was a year ago, 2 years ago, they will remember that, and they might put your name forward for something else or commission you in the future. But I think, yeah, the more you can see your work and your name known, the better it is for you.
And I think on that, it's also worth recognising the people you see in a portfolio review can become your contact list. Be making a note of their name and contact, and then you should be keeping them informed over time about your work. It's that cumulative thing again. I'll just get to the next slide.
Yeah.
How do they usually work? For reviews done in festivals or for mass viewings, you usually get a 20-minute slot, which I think is what we have online, isn't it, Niamh, for this? So think about that duration. Think about how many images you can show in that time. Sometimes it's 30 minutes, and that means you have to show a batch more work. So 20 minutes, I would probably guesstimate, would be 20 images, really. So you would want to see a couple of different series of work, and you'd want to see a few different projects, some in development, some that have been completed. You don't want to bring 100 images. It's probably less online, but I have had people come to the table in a portfolio review with 100 images, and your heart kind of sinks because you think, I can't get through this number of images in this time. But also what it says is you haven't edited your work, and actually that's a little bit lazy. And so the reviewer is going to think, oh, I'm going to have to do an edit now, because that's what I'm going to have to spend my time doing, is looking at a lot of work because you haven't been able to pick the best examples of your practice. So, you know, that's where it's a sort of level playing field, and you're expected to kind of edit and sequence your work. In a portfolio review, it's about the order in which you show your work, which will be less of an issue online, but when it's in person, a lot of what happens is you're seeing a lot of people in quick succession, and your portfolio gets out of order, and you have to spend quite a bit of time reordering things. But I think online that will be more containable, actually, and more manageable.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with I'm going to touch in a little bit on the platform we're using for the format portfolio reviews, but you can reorder your images online, so that's really good. So just making sure for anyone attending the portfolio reviews is that you've kind of had a look at the order you're showing your images online beforehand. And another thing I think having online reviews is taking away, we often get a lot of questions about how large should I print my work for a portfolio review. And yeah, you obviously don't want to come to a portfolio review with like an AO print, but yeah, I think this is good that it takes away that stress when we have them online. So it's bringing new challenges, but also bringing, like, I think, a nicer way of dealing with a portfolio review.
I mean, we will go through this later, but, you know, having said that, you know, you're watching it online, because it will be on Zoom as well, you are able to hold up a print. You can, the physical presence of the print, which we'll talk about a bit in a minute. Don't be limited by just the online. If you've got prints and you want to show them, do show them. But yes, obviously most of it will be digital. So an online review is a digital platform. You have to submit work in advance. From the feedback I've had, I've done a few portfolio reviews for Red Eye in lockdown. I've done stuff with my students in lockdown. I think that's definitely one of the ways it's shifting with this platform, is that you tend to look at things in advance. Obviously, usually I would literally just turn up on the day, I would see the work when you arrive, and that is it. When you're doing it online, and I think this is probably a plus, people will be looking at the work before they meet you, and there will be a little bit of that percolation time, that time to sort of let the work sit with you, have a think about it, make some notes around the work, and then you'll see the person. And actually that's quite nice. There's a longer engagement in some ways because it's online. I know Niamh will go through the specific format, but I've been recommending people do things as a PowerPoint usually, and then save it as a PDF. Not quite sure why, but it seems to work better as a PDF. And also the advantage, if you are sharing a PDF for online reviews, is you can scroll up and down, and so people can see several of the images at once. but again, that won't apply specifically for format, but for other ones. Obviously, when you're formatting your work, I am not a technical wizard, but I do know that a TIFF file is bad and a JPEG is good. That's the sum of knowledge.
Yeah,
but you know,
big for a portfolio if you want.
But you know, obviously you've got to think about image size and it not being too clunky. That is probably the advantage as well of putting it into a PDF, is it condenses all the files for you. So you don't want those sort of technical glitches of not being able to upload or not being able to access things that you want to show. And although it's a very obvious thing to say, and you're probably also digitally savvy, this will seem redundant, but for people who are analog, you can scan in obviously a print, you can scan in a physical print, or you can do a digital image. So whatever format you're working in, you should be able to find a way to digitize that content.
Yeah, and I think if there are analog people watching, it's, even though you might feel like you're losing something about the image or the quality by scanning in, it's just important to explain that in your review and include that in the information that you are an analog photographer. But and reviewers will understand that it's online and it's a different way of viewing your work.
So do you want to talk a little bit more about the platform being used for format?
Yes, so obviously this is the first online format review, but this year we'll, anyone that's watching that is attending the review will already know this, but we are using Picta, which is a picture hosting site. Often you can apply for open calls on there. So all of our participants will be uploading their portfolios to Picta. Within there, they're able to add information about themselves, they're able to add information about individual images, rename the images, move them around, and put them into different collections. So they can add different series into kind of labelled collections, which are really easy for the reviewers to see. We will be sharing those with the reviewers prior to the review. So as you said, reviewers will have a bit of time to kind of look through them before the review, spend some time with them, so they're not going, like in a real life review, they're not going straight into it and seeing your work for the first time. Yeah, I think that's all I was, oh yeah, our reviews are still 20 minutes, and then we'll be using Zoom for our for the video side of our reviews.
Cool, thank you, Niamh. So what can you put in your review portfolio? I'm a big advocate, this is probably because I'm a curator, for background shots. You know, I think you know, one of the things that you miss digitally is scale. You don't have any sense of scale, so think about that. You know, if you're even if you haven't printed your work but you're thinking big, you need to find a way to put that information in there. If you are thinking of it as an installation as opposed to just a traditional series of images, even how you'd hang it. I mean, I love talking to people about how they're going to display their work and how they might present it and what you've been thinking about. You know, are you going to put it behind diabond? Are you going to put it behind glass? Are you going to do it as a series on the wall, a straight line or a scatter approach? You know, what are you thinking about visually? Because then I can start to imagine, as we're looking at the work digitally, how it might look in a space. If you have a book format of the work, think about how you might be able to share that, because you can bring in things like that as well. Obviously, there's not going to be masses of time, but what you might want to do is predominantly focus on the online digital platform. But then if you find you're getting through your 20 minutes quite quickly, then you might want to then bring in another format that you can talk about and show. But be flexible, because the time can go very, very quickly, actually. Do you have any installation shots of the work? Don't worry if these are rough and ready. It doesn't matter. I mean, I'd be perfectly happy to see photographs just stuck up on the wall in your house that you think, oh, actually, I quite like the sequence here and I quite like the way that's working. So it doesn't have to be polished, doesn't have to be finished, but it's really nice when people take the time to think that through, because it shows they've thought about that final display of their work. Would you frame your work? How would you display it? Discuss that. I mean, again, you can get some helpful ideas. You know, if these people are working on exhibitions all the time, they're very used to doing this, they can tell you what the latest fashions are, they can give you some tips, they can make you think about things. I mean, an obvious thing is if you have dark prints, if you're working in dark color ranges, reflection's a real issue. You know, when you have the work displayed on the wall, that issue with reflection and light is a problem. And that's something I've had to deal with a lot over the years as a curator. So that's something that's worth talking about. And if you're struggling with an element of it and thinking, well, I'd like some advice, do I go gloss or do I go matte? You know, you can have that kind of practical conversation as well. And obviously people like myself, that's what we do all the time. So, you know, make the most of our experience. And I put in bold at the bottom, but don't worry about being judged. I suppose what I should explain here is a difference between a fine art portfolio review and a commercial portfolio review. And the two are kind of blurred at format because you get your newspaper picture editors and you get your curators and you get your publishers. But usually you'd actually have two very different types of portfolio, one for commercial work and one for fine art work. And generally the fine art work is a bit more rough and ready, work in progress, ideas, maybe a bit more conceptual. And your commercial portfolio would need to be very slick and very professional and look pristine. So there is a difference there. Within a contemporary art, fine art context, you don't have to be so polished. And actually it's quite interesting to see things that you're mulling over and that you're progressing with, but you haven't finished yet.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good to say. I was going to ask a question here, and I was going to say, do you think it's important to tailor the types of background images as well as your portfolios, obviously, to the reviewers you're seeing?
Absolutely. That's that editing and context. And I think you need to think about that. You need to think about how you're going to present your work to each person that you see so that you can get the most from that conversation. I mean, let's put it this way. If someone brings a very commercial portfolio to me, that's quite difficult for me to have a conversation with them about, because I can't offer them that type of work and that isn't my experience. So it's almost a waste of a review, whereas I would actually be much happier to see more around the work and the ideas and work in progress and talk to them around those sorts of things. So yes, ideally you should be flexible enough to be changing the material for the context. And if you do one portfolio through Picture online for everybody you see, that's fine. But maybe just make sure you have other stuff for the specific reviews that you're seeing.
Yeah, and I think with online, with our Picture platform, there's the chance to upload various different series, but kind of maybe even label them or make it clear which reviewer. You might want to show different series to different reviewers, and there is that option to do that. So one reviewer might not be seeing them all, but you might be splitting them between the different reviewers you're seeing.
I just we've had a couple of people ask about a term that you've used, Camilla. Background shots. Could you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Okay, yeah, so yeah, I guess what I mean by that is installation shots or shots of a print. If you had an image of a print printed to scale, that would be useful to see so that we get this idea. It can convey that idea of how you print it. Or it might be, if you have a book format of the work, photograph the book and then put that up online. So that's sort of around and about the work as well as the work itself. That's what I mean.
I know, oh sorry Laura, I know one of our participants in the portfolio reviews this year has put together a PDF of a mock book they're making. Brilliant. And he has been able to, you can upload PDFs to Picture if there's anyone else thinking about that. So as well as JPEGs, yeah, she's uploaded a PDF which is yeah, kind of the mock-up of the book that she wants to present.
And that's really helpful because there's a number of editors and publishers there, and what a great opportunity to get their feedback on how they would sequence your images and how they would do it. I mean, you may not get the publisher you want from it, but you could get some brilliant advice on how to present your work in book format.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Just one other question, which is very relevant to what you're saying, is what if your practice spreads into both worlds, art and commercial, in terms of sequencing, etc.?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's no bad in there. And obviously the ideal scenario is to have enough work that you can show a complete commercial portfolio and a complete fine art portfolio, but most people are actually going to be in between the two. And that's fine. I suppose that, I mean, I'm very happy to look at commercial work as well as fine art work, but what I would probably steer the conversation towards is more the fine art, and that's great. I guess what I'm thinking is a scenario of it being a purely commercial portfolio, that would be more difficult for me to keep the conversation going about in some ways. But no, I mean, I can think of any number of artists I've seen who do, for example, beautiful portrait photography, who can do that for commission and do really wonderful work, and you can see their eye in that context, and then they also have their own work alongside it. And for some people those things are very blurred, actually, one and the same thing. So it's not a steadfast rule, but I suppose what I was trying to avoid was that situation of, as a curator, just being shown purely commercial work.
I think it's also important to say that before you go into your review or book your place, it's really, really important to read your reviewers' bios, because some reviewers are quite open to seeing different work. It depends on their role in the art world, but some people are very, very specific about what they want to see and what they don't want to see. And you don't ever want, if you haven't done that research before, you don't want to go into a review and waste your time or money. So it's really important to read the bios that are provided, and usually, well, format definitely does, we kind of get the reviewers to say what they do want to see, what they don't want to see.
I think I keep it quite broad.
And that's
I'll see anybody. I'll see anybody. Talking about your work. So originally in this, I was talking about writing about your work, because certainly on the Lens Culture platform, which I've mentioned, what I find quite interesting about looking at work there is the text and the image have a real parity when you're looking online, which is quite surprising. But the two, you almost see them simultaneously. And really, I'm reading the statements as much as I'm looking at the images. And then what I'm doing is interrogating the statement against the image. Now, because of the platform that Format is using, that is not the case for this. It will be purely image-led. But actually there isn't so much room for text. Well, I think there is room for text, but I would recommend you think about the text that you would put alongside the work, because I guess there's a lot of stuff that is missing when you're looking at work online. You don't get a sense of scale, you don't get a sense of texture. It's very, very difficult to tell how you have made the work. So, you need to say if you're digitally manipulating imagery, or if you're an analog photographer and it's really important that it's analog, you need to actually talk about process, I think, and there's probably a little bit more of a push for that when you're looking at work online, because so much gets lost. What sort of camera you're using, what sort of resolution you'd go to, what sort of size files do you have? Not to be really nerdy and specific, but this has come up a bit for me recently. You can see beautiful images and they're taken on an iPhone, and that's absolutely fine. But there's no way you could ever blow those images up large, and you could never really show that work in a big scale space unless you print it, scan it, and then reprint it. So scan is quite important. So there is this sort of language that you have to form about your practice, which you'd obviously be doing more verbally in this sense, but I think it probably would help to try and write that down ahead of doing your reviews. I don't want to put a massive pressure on everybody, but actually writing a sort of key 300 to 350 word statement about your work is going to really help you focus your thoughts, and it's going to help you to be very succinct and very punchy. So I was doing portfolio reviews online and someone said, oh, is this what we mean by an elevator pitch? I hadn't actually heard that term before, and I kind of thought actually it is what we're talking about, which is if you were stuck in a lift with the director of Magnum and you wanted to get a commission from them, what would you say about yourself? How would you describe your practice in that 2 minutes? And I think what helps to be really succinct and really do this from the top of your head and not overthink it too much is actually you will in that situation really, usually people nail it. They just have to say very succinctly who they are, what they are, the who, why, what, when of your work. And that is incredibly helpful to have that sort of overview. It's like you having to brand yourself, because there is an element of this being a pitch. And actually once you find that language around your practice, you'll find that incredibly helpful. And I also think it's helpful to think about 150 words for each of your series as well, to sort of really succinctly explain. I mean, some people will have very, very long text. I love reading and it's great, but I'm not going to read an essay in a portfolio review because I'm not going to have time. So there's no point providing a huge amount of textual background. People will not have the time to read it. So it's this self-editing process that I think it would be worth doing in the sort of preparation stage. And I suppose the advantage is because you're going to be saying it verbally and you don't necessarily have to write it down. You don't have to worry about your spelling. You don't have to worry about your grammar, but just try and get that kind of 5-minute pitch of how you're going to sum up your practice and communicate clearly and directly about your work.
Yeah, I think, I mean, as an artist, I find it still really hard to talk and write about my work. But I think a really good tip is that just talk to your family and friends about your work, kind of practice telling them what it's about, and questions may come up. And just by verbalizing it, you kind of open up like areas of stuff that you want to talk about that you wouldn't actually be able to get down in words, or you hadn't been able to do before. So I think just keep practicing prior to your review, and that will really help.
Right, we'll go to the next slide. So if you're stuck on this, there's some tips, and I do slip here between writing and the verbal, because I expect it's probably, you know, you can do this orally, but you can also write it down. But it sort of is that 300 words, and 300 words isn't very much, really isn't very much. So then the challenge is to be succinct in your language, write it down, get used to reading it, and think about what you're aiming to say. And as Niamh said, that's a very good example. I think one of the things that will often happen is people will feel the need to use art speak and to use very long terms and to be very, very clever. You don't need to be like that at all. It needs to be accessible, it needs to be direct, and it needs to communicate clearly. You know, actually that is intelligent. You know, when somebody can do that, that is much more intelligent than using a word that you don't necessarily understand. So it's the idea of speaking to somebody. You're obviously seeing specialists, but kind of forget that. Imagine you're speaking to somebody you know who doesn't know about the art world and doesn't know about photography. How would you describe to them what you do? Now, this is useful for reviews, it's useful for pictures, but actually it's useful when you're making work, because often when you're making work, certainly that involves other people, you have to explain yourself quite often. So once you get this right and you're comfortable with it, it's done, you know? So it's well worth taking that step.
Just another question very directly related to what you're saying, Camilla. Someone just asked, so here, are you talking about uploading a small portion of text to the Pictor website so the reviewers can read this ahead of time, or is this suggestion just to write about it so they're able to talk about it on the day?
I think either. I mean, I think, you know, given that we're going to be looking at work ahead of time, I suppose what you have to be aware of is when you're looking at work simply as images digitally online, I always see it as them being sort of floating in the ether. You know, you don't have any context, you don't have any positioning, and you don't have any way to really place that work. So anything you can give, be it a series title, a caption, some information. I wouldn't sweat it. I'm not asking you to have to do this and put huge pressure on yourself, but I think it would be helpful if you're comfortable with what you come to put that onto Pictor. But yes, otherwise you can say it in the forum of the review as well. But I mean, I would just have a little think, even if it's just saying the title of the series and the size of the work, so that they're not just trying to absorb something purely visually without any context.
Yeah, I think with Pictor as well, for anyone attending the reviews, you can add your, if you've watched the video that we've made about how to upload everything, you can add information, so something more about your bio, about you, to the folder. But then if you go into your individual images, there's a chance to add, I think it's 1,500 characters to each image. So there you may want to add a bit about one of the series. You may, like you said, may want to write about what you'd see it being printed on, the scale you may add to it. So yeah, I think there is the chance to add information to Pictor, but that may not be read in the review. There may not be time, but it's there that the reviewer could look at before. But it is really important to be able to practice how you describe your work in person.
I think the bio is helpful as well, because usually in a portfolio review, somebody would have a brief bio there. Now that's mainly, it's that orientation thing. You know, some people are going to have a lot more experience than others, but if you have been nominated for things, or if you have had exhibitions, people kind of want to see that, because then it will help them place your work and place the context of your practice. And in some ways that you shouldn't need to do that, but that's kind of the way the world works. And often we might recognize the venue, or we might know the show, or we might know the thing that you were in, and that sort of makes sense in our brains of where we place you and where you sit. And obviously that's something, as you get more experience and you develop, you're going to have more of. But you know, most of the younger emerging artists I know will have done something. So even if it's a group show that you don't think anyone would have heard of, you know, put it down there, you know, flag the fact that you have that experience, because this is a journey that you're on, that you are only going to get more and more experience as you go along. But make sure you highlight the things. I may have seen your work, you may have won a portrait prize, and I may have seen your image and I haven't placed it because my memory isn't that good. So, you know, put it down and have that bio there. Is that okay, Niamh?
Yeah, no, that's great.
So developing, I can't see the top of this at the moment. Developing the language for your work. So this is something I bang on to my poor students about, and I know some of them are in the audience, so they're just going to hear me saying it again, again. But I feel quite strongly that you need to develop a language for your practice as a visual artist. And obviously one of the things that can hit against is people who are, I want the work to speak for itself. Why do I need to write about my images? They should just communicate, and you should just understand what I'm trying to communicate with my work. And I don't accept that. I think you have to develop as an artist, you have to develop a language, because nobody else is going to do it for you. You have to do it yourself. And the thing about not doing it is someone else could get it wrong. You know, I've been in a situation where someone hasn't had a statement, I've worked with them on their first show, and I've had to start from scratch to develop a language for their practice. And that is a very slow and painful process of fumbling around and finding the wrong words. You know, you call someone a documentary photographer and they get really offended because they are not a documentary photographer. Well, that's useful to know, and actually asking them, well, why do you feel strongly about that term? What is it about that term that you don't like? Can help you reveal a bit more about where they see their practice. So do that work for people, because you need that work around. That's part of the authorship of your practice. Work doesn't speak for itself. We all know, we're all familiar with the reading of the image, and Roland Barthes, I assume, we're all familiar with this idea that a work is read, and everybody's a priori experience that they bring to when they look at an image will shift their reading and interpretation of that work. And you can't control those triggers. You can't control how somebody's going to interpret your work. You might be making work from a really good place that's really political, that could be read in a completely different way by someone with a different experience. So images are not that clearly they don't communicate directly enough sometimes. We'd like to think that they do, but they don't. There's slippage there, and you can help define and position your work. So for me, developing an artistic voice is taking control of your practice, and it's really important to have that control over your work. I think, Niamh, you'd like to add to my rant?
No, I think that's, you've described that well. I think it is important.
I think it's a confidence thing as well. I think a lot of this is being confident, and that is one of the challenges. You know, I think you have to feel confident to be able to talk confidently about your practice, and most of us have anxieties and insecurities and imposter syndrome and all these other things going on that make us feel very nervous. And I do totally understand that. And I guess that's why I'd recommend preparation. You know, once you get this nailed, once you know how to talk about your practice, you can keep rehearsing that. And then when you are nervous and you're on the spot, you're just going to have it there. You're going to have your spiel, and you're going to be able to talk about it confidently. So do that in preparation. Don't expect yourself to be able to do that in the moment. Do it ahead of time. So here I just talk a bit more about confidently speaking about your work, and that it's not an easy thing to do, speaking out about your work so that it can be compelling. So look at it this way. You know, you meet in that lift scenario, like that elevator scenario, and you meet someone who's a great contact, but you haven't rehearsed how you speak about your work. And so you have no way of engaging with them, and you have no way of talking to them. And you think afterwards, I could have said something to them. I could have told them about my work. So once you've got this kind of rehearsed way of talking about yourself, it's incredibly useful. You can just repeat. When you're in interviews, when you go for jobs, you know, all these other contexts, you're going to be able to use that spiel. So how do you start when you're trying to develop this language around your practice? Well, I think the first thing is, what are you trying to say with your work? I mean, don't worry about how successful or not you think that is, but what are you trying to say? Do you have a point that you're trying to make? If you're photographing a particular type of person, a particular community group, well, why are you photographing that community group? What message are you trying to convey? You might be photographing young Muslim men because you are a young Muslim man and you want to convey something around that community. That's really interesting. And I want to know more about it, and I want to know why you're doing it. So have a little think about what you were trying to say with your work and what you're trying to communicate, because that's a good conversation point. And what's the story you're trying to tell? So images are a visual narrative. You're building up this narrative around your practice. So you have something that you want to convey, and it's worth spending a bit of time thinking about that, challenging yourself. And it might be something that was really at the beginning of the practice and you kind of lost along the way. So it's sometimes about just going back to basics of what took you to make that work and why you started it. And then, why are you making this work? what is the specific thing that's interested you about it? What's your perspective? What are you trying to get? You're photographing children. Well, why are you photographing children? What do you want to say about children? And why do you feel you're the best person to say that? That isn't to be aggressive or confrontational, but again, with that example I gave around a young Muslim man, that's very interesting. If you are photographing a group because you respond or empathize with that group, then I want to know. Or if you've got a political motivation, I want to know. What was your way in? Why did you create it? And why would you have something unique to say about it as well? Do chip in. I mean, I'm just going to go through the...
No, I think you said there, even going back to basics, I think that's really important in a review setting, is that there may not always be time to go majorly into depth about this stuff. It's important to have it practiced, but just, yeah, go back to basics to start with, and then there's always the chance for a reviewer to pick up on certain points that they want to find out more about. But having that basic underlying information is really important, and then being able to expand on it where necessary, especially in a 20-minute setting.
And I think also what's useful about that is sometimes you might have an aim for a project and actually be struggling with the final realization of that. You know, you can lose the message along the way, and maybe in the review that person can just offer you some suggestions of, well, you need to put a bit more text in, or have you interviewed the people that you're photographing, or maybe the sequence, you know, so it kind of helps as a rejig of what you're doing.
Yeah,
it's a slightly mean one. Why should the viewer care? But I think, you know, you can get so absorbed with what you're doing, and you can love what you're doing so much that you completely lose sight of any audience. You know, you might have done the most amazing project, but why would it be relevant to other people? And as a curator, one of the things that comes up a lot is, and when I was working in a venue, we would have to pitch ideas for shows. And the main thing that we were asked to sort of critically contextualize was, why did we want to do that exhibition at that moment in time? What was relevant now? There's always this idea of a zeitgeist and the moment, and why is that relevant now? And sometimes that can be reviewing a historical moment that suddenly has a new twist or spin to it. But that is the sort of thing I would be thinking about when I'm looking at somebody's work. What is it saying about young people today? What is it saying about our community? What's it saying about our world today? Why is this interesting? And I think it's worth kind of testing yourself on that. What's the significance? What's valuable? Why are you seeing it differently to anyone else? What's your perspective? What are you observing that I wouldn't observe? You know, and why is your voice the best one to transmit this information? So sort of ask yourself that. And it, you know, it can be as simple as just, you're from that community, so therefore you were able to get access to that community. Well, that's really useful if you're making work about a community that's very difficult to reach. Well, you might not be doing politically engaged work at all and have a completely different perspective. It might be more about how you see light, or how you see colour, or how you see the world around you. But have a little bit of think about your USP, your specific stance, and don't undervalue things like your age or your background and your experience that gives you an empathy for what you're doing, because that actually could be your greatest strength, you know. And in terms of commissioning new work, which a curator will be looking at as well, that could be a real plus. So don't undersell yourself, you know. Yeah. Biography, well, I wasn't sure if I can remember if I put this, but I do think it's useful to share a biography.
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry, with this, yeah, there is, we've touched on it, but there is the chance to upload this to Picture, and I think on other online portfolio reviews, sometimes there's often a section to upload a biography, and I wrote a note about the CV that it may not be something you'd want to go through in the review, but if it's maybe uploaded as a file, it's there to view before and after, and it's just something else to inform the reviewer about your history, really.
Right. So it is helpful. It kind of orientates and places your work. So just to sort of keep you thinking about how to describe your practice and what questions people might want to ask and what you should be thinking about, I've just sort of come up with a list of questions, which is, what is your favourite camera and why? For all those technically minded photographers, you're going to love this one. You're going to talk about your camera. But it's interesting. It's interesting to know why you go for that particular format, what you're trying to achieve, what the end result is. What's your favourite printing material, framing, why? What do you like best about what you do? And then this is a question I find helpful, is what do you mean when you say that a piece has turned out really well? So often you'll be procrastinating and self-editing all the time, and you'll be making decisions about what works and what doesn't work through the process of creating. And actually trying to unpick that creative process a bit is really helpful, because it will give me an insight into how your mind is working, I guess. And if I can work out how your mind is working on one series, that enables me to predict how you might approach another series of work. So that I find a really useful question, because even if you find it hard to articulate that, and you find it hard to find a language to express it, most artists I know have a kind of, in their heads, they know when a project is done, and they know when it's finished, and they know when it's gone well. But it's often a process of teasing that out of them to get them to articulate it. Think about what patterns emerge in your work. Now, this can be difficult if you're young and you've only got a couple of series. It can also be difficult if your work's quite eclectic. And for the person who was talking about commercial and fine art work, you know, it might be hard because, well, your commercial work's instigated by a commercial commission, but it might tap into things that you're already interested in. So it can take time to develop this, but I would be looking for patterns. I would be looking for ideas and notions. It might be different subjects and different approaches, but most people will have a strand that is being developed across their work. And what do you do differently from the way you were taught? You might have made critical decisions about your practice and how you work, and you've developed that over time. So maybe give that some thought. You've made intentional decisions, and it's useful to unpick what the basis of those decisions were, to sort of, again, find out what you're trying to achieve in your work. Niamh, I don't know if you have anything you want to say on that side.
No, I think, I think it's just being confident about your work. The reviewer wants to see the confidence you have in your own work. You need to be sure of what you're making and why you're making it, and a reviewer will like that. They don't want to have to, fill in the gaps for you and tell you why you're doing things and pick that up themselves. It's going to fuel the review if you can be confident in that.
Editing your work. This is about a curated edit, so be aware of sequencing and telling a story. It doesn't look good if things are too jumbled up. I would like to see across 2 to 3 series of work in a review, although people will bring up lots of different amounts of work, and some people prefer you to show one body of work. I think the issue with just showing one body of work is, if you see this as one, opening up opportunities for yourself, you show one body of work, you limit the opportunity. Because when I see when I was curating actively at a gallery, I would be thinking about group exhibitions all the time. And often one of the ways I could show more emerging artists' work was in a group show, where I'd have very established artists, and then I'd bring in younger artists, or emerging, doesn't have to be younger, artists' work as well. I would be looking at a really specific theme. You have no way of being able to predict what I would be looking at. So I did a show about offices and about office culture. You wouldn't have known that. I was working on that for 2 years in advance. Anyone who showed me office work stood a very good chance of getting into that exhibition. So if you just show me one series of work, which was a later series of work that you love, but you didn't show me anything around the edges and around the side and the other things that you've worked on, I just wouldn't have known. And you don't know what theme someone's looking at. And often curators talk to each other and say, I'm doing a show about this. This is what I'm looking for. Can you please tell me if you see any interesting work about X or Y? And it's impossible to predict what that's going to be. But showing 2 to 3 series of work just opens up possibilities. You might show one work and it's pretty much the same as an exhibition we've recently had, and there's no way we're going to touch on that subject again for a while. So broaden it out all the time so that you can open up the conversation more.
Yeah.
And the advantage of showing a few series is it also shows how your work develops over time. So if you're struggling with what the strands are with your work, maybe that's the thing. Maybe that's the thing you'd like to talk to somebody about. How can I give continuity to this work, because I'm swapping from one thing to the next and there isn't that continuity? And people are looking for a kind of artistic statement and signature in your work. And that can be difficult to get to, because you could be very eclectic in the way that you make your work. I've spoken to people, for example, who don't like working in series. They like to make single images. That doesn't sit well in the curatorial context. We want people to work in series. And if you don't work in series, we don't really know what to do. That might not be a problem for a picture editor, but it would be a problem for a curator. So if maybe this could be the thing that you're bringing to the table. I'm not quite sure how to tie this up. what narrative do you see developing from this series to this series to this series? And maybe that's a conversation that we could have, and the reviewer could help you pull that through. So this is where I'm saying it's not, you know, this is a discursive platform. It's not the finished article. You can be trying things out within this context as well. I think people are very open to that, because actually that gives them an opportunity to have an input. You know, if things are very resolved and finished and done, all you're doing is looking at a complete project. But if things are more, you know, if you're bringing things that are questions or things that you're unsure about, well, maybe these people can help you. So, and I'm very nosy. So I like to often ask people to show me the work they don't want to show me, because I've found that people can be quite underconfident about things that are really, really interesting. And they might have a project that they're really not sure how to develop it. And that's the one I want to talk to them about, because I could actually have an insight into that. I've developed a lot of commissions with artists. I've developed things over a long period of time, and I love to be in the conversation from the beginning. So that is me, but, you know, I would never hold back from showing the stuff you're not confident about sometimes, but that's troubling you, because there could be something really interesting in that.
Yeah, I was going to say, so do you think for the artists watching, they should then include a almost wild card?
Exactly. Have a wild card. Have a wild card. Why not? And again, you can see how the discussion goes. You know, and if you're 20 minutes, I'm not sure how that, or we were talking about this, weren't we? I kind of thought online reviews, it might be difficult to fill the time, but I'm actually finding it's very easy to fill the time of 20 minutes. So you might not have time, but if you have a wild card that you can bring in, if you realise you need it, you've got a bit more time, you know, be open to that. I think that's great.
You also might be surprised that the reviewer picks up on it straight away, and you might not have thought they may have. So I think, yeah, I think it's important to, yeah, like you said, bringing those works that you might not have been confident about, and just try it. You never know.
So I like to see work in progress. I like to see things which are unresolved. I like to see things which I think have room to be shaped or developed. I get a real sense of how you work, and that is particularly key for people who are offering commissioning opportunities. And a lot of curators now will be in a position where they'll be working with funders, and they will have work they have to develop around a very specific brief. Always going to be a brief. You're rarely asked to just make your own artwork. It will be some sort of socially engaged practice. It will be something that hits other outcomes. And then the creative role of the curator is matching the right artist for that opportunity, so that it would develop something really interesting in that artist's work, as well as hit the boxes for the funder. And that's what a curator does, is they bridge that relationship either between a venue and the artist, or between a funder and the artist. And that's the creative act of curating. So, you know, that's the challenge, and that's the thing that's exciting about it, is to find somebody you think works in an interesting way. You get a sense of how they work, but you also have to have a sense of confidence that they're going to deliver, and that they're going to do something interesting. And that's really exciting to then be able to offer them an opportunity. So that's why I'm saying this sort of early work, this undeveloped work, can be quite interesting as well.
Yeah, I think it's, yeah, again, just don't be afraid to show that work. And there's going to be a lot of photographers here that are at different stages of their career. So I know we have some students attending the reviews, and we've definitely got some established artists who have a long list of previous made completed projects, and some that don't. And reviewers do want to see that work in progress. It's important to have your portfolio kind of together and presented in a good way, but you don't have to have 6 previous exhibitions to show them.
How are we doing on time, Niamh? I realise we're taking...
Yeah, I think we're doing quite well. We've only got a couple of slides left, I think, haven't we? Yeah.
So a review is a rare chance to show your work, and people have different tastes. So here's the thing. If you see 8 people in a day, you're going to get 8 different opinions on your work, and it's going to take time to process it. And some people can find that very unsettling. I don't know the difference between doing this face-to-face and online from your perspective, but I do know when we've done it face-to-face, you do get photographers who are quite upset sometimes. They've had a difficult conversation with someone who hasn't been positive about their work, or it might also be that thing, nobody takes criticism that well, to be fair. We all prey on the negatives more than the positives. And it might have just been one comment that's been made that's upset you, or it's been hard to process. You might have someone who just didn't like your work, and didn't empathize with it. Now, all the reviews should be professional and all the reviews should be kind, but not everybody is kind. And sometimes people will give you quite harsh advice because they want to make you think about things. But what you'll find is you will get bounced around a bit with the different opinions you get. And what you have to do is give yourself time to decompress, not take it to heart, think it through. You know what? If they didn't like your work, so what? Doesn't matter. There might be one or two things they've said that's actually quite helpful. It might not be helpful. They may just simply have not resonated with your work, and that's fine. That doesn't invalidate your practice. That doesn't mean you're not a good artist. It just means they individually did not like your work. And at the end of the day, we're all giving our subjective individual opinions, and some of us are right and some of us are wrong. And you've got to be aware of that. So I think it can be quite challenging. I think it can be quite hard for photographers to get all these different opinions because they just want to know the way to go and the right answer, but there is no right answer and they're getting bounced around. So you have to kind of give yourself time to decompress, think through the advice, not take everything to heart. You know, if you get one or two reviewers who've resonated with your work and you got on with, that is a brilliant output, that's brilliant, and that's really positive, but not everybody's going to like it, so don't be disheartened. Give yourself time to filter the advice, let it sit with you for a bit, see what you think. Be aware that you're going to get completely contradictory advice. I want that image in, I want that image out. You know, it's going to happen. So don't take it all to heart and give it time to process. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I think it's important here to talk about the practicalities of reviews as well. So specifically with format reviews, we offer 4, 6 or 8. We don't offer them individually, we offer them in groups. So I think for people that have never been to a review before, you would, if you were attending a format review, we'd always suggest go in with 4. But if you're very experienced at reviews, you could go in with 8, because not only for the reviewers, but for the artists, reviews are very mentally challenging. They're exhausting because you're kind of pouring your heart out about this work that you may have been creating for 3 years, 8 times to 8 different people, and you are being flooded with different opinions. And our reviews are run over 1 or 2 days, depending on the festival. But I think it's also important to spread your reviews out. We often get people that will book 4 reviews back to back, and that might be okay for you, but you almost need that time between the reviews to just kind of soak in what you've been told and kind of dwell on it before going straight into a next review, and just give yourself time with that information. So don't feel like, if you've never been to a review before, to go straight in and have 8 reviews and get as much information, because it might be quite hard to deal with if you've never been in that position before.
Legacy. So one of the things I've been trying to work through here is when we do this face-to-face, people will leave you a business card or a print or a postcard. And what I quite like is when people give you an option. So they've had various different images reproduced, and they'll say, which one did you like? I like that. And then you get to pick one you like, and then you have that. Because as Niamh said, you know, we're seeing a lot of people in quick succession. It can be quite difficult to remember everybody in the nicest possible way, because it blurs over the whole day. So it is useful to have some way of leaving something behind. Now, I wasn't 100% sure of the best way for you to do this online. I understand that we will have access to the images beyond the review because we would have got them ahead of time. So we'll have that ability to go back and check. But it's always worth thinking about what you might be able to leave behind. Now, it could be a website, if you've got one, that gives you that sort of permanent shop front for your practice, or a web link. But I just wanted to sort of flag that it's worth having something you can leave with people, so that they can, that when they're asked, we're often asked to pick the best people we've seen, and you want to remember everybody you've seen. So anything you can do to kind of have that legacy is really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously in a real life review, we would always suggest to have a business card, or if you can create postcards, so there's an image of your work, because I know a lot of reviewers will store those, and to jog their memory they want to just see a visual cue to remind them of who you were. But obviously that's not possible in this sense. So I think if you can share a website or your Instagram handle with the reviewer, and again, yeah, Picture will be there for, we're currently working out how long it's going to be accessible for the reviewers, but it will be there before and after, so they will have a chance to maybe write down names that really interest them. So yeah,
great. That's I think that is the end of the presentation. And I won't show the portfolio review. We'll see what the questions are, because I said I had that example, but I think we'll overrun if we do that. So I'll let Laura come in to ask us a few questions.
I did just want to say before Laura comes in, I just seen a couple of comments pop up that a couple of people have said they record their reviews. One lady said that they're dyslexic, and I'm dyslexic and find information really hard to process if I'm in a lecture or something, and I think that's really important. It's always good to ask the reviewer you're seeing first if they're okay with you recording it. But I think a lot of people, if you kind of explain that it'll help you if you do have dyslexia or anything, that's a really good way to kind of remember what you've been told, because it might be a bit hard to process. But yeah,
I think it's a really good idea to record. I think it's one of the things you can do online and be well worth it, because as I said before, you sometimes will come away and only remember a couple of negative things. But if you re-look at that recording, you might realise actually a lot more was said. So I think that would be a really good idea.
Yeah, definitely. So Laura, do we have, it looks like we've got a lot of questions, actually, the most we've had in any of our talks.
Oh, wow, that's great, thank
you to everybody watching and for asking questions that I'm sure lots of other people are thinking about. And thank you to Camilla and Niamh for such an insightful discussion about portfolio reviews and how to approach them. A really nice comment here saying this is the best ever intro I've seen about portfolio reviews and about presenting to oneself in general. So that's really
great. That's great. I can go home. I can stay home happy. I was going to say I can go home happy, but I can stay.
Well, we've got quite a few questions here. So
is it distracting to have the share screen? Should I take it down or should I just leave it up? We could take it down now if you want. People can see.
Yeah.
Our full glory.
Yeah, so I guess due to the nature of lots of people being people that are going to be attending the portfolio reviews next Saturday, some are quite picture specific, whereas others are kind of more aimed at Camilla and kind of how you approach the reviews. So they'll kind of go between both of you, I guess. So one of the first questions is from Facebook, and there's another question on Zoom which is similar, which is so when you upload images to Picture, do you upload it at full resolution and size? And then someone's kind of added to that by saying, so like, do you show at 150 DPI for online portfolios, or is that too small, or do you going to go up to 1500 DPI?
I think with Picture, there will be, I think there's an upload limit. You don't want them to be too large just because they might take a while to upload. With online, it's easier to upload smaller images like you would to a website. You don't need to upload massive files to a website because they're never going to be viewed in a really large way. So you can get away with uploading smaller sizes if you have them. It will take longer to upload larger files to Picture. So just be mindful of that. And yeah, so I don't know if you want to, I think even with a PDF, yeah, you just don't want massive files, so don't worry about having them at full resolution, at full size that you would maybe print them in. They can be smaller.
Great, okay. This is a question from Ron on Facebook. He said, if a photographer shows you work that you consider horrible, what do you tell them?
That's a good question. Well, I started off doing reviews being far too nice, and I've learnt over the years that people want direct feedback, and that most of the responses I get from reviews, be it online or and person to person, is that people want an honest response. So when I worked at Tate Liverpool, for example, when I was young, I sort of felt the need to placate, and actually that just gave people mixed messages. So if I didn't like somebody's work, I wouldn't probably phrase it like that work's rubbish. But I would try and think of a critical comment I could make that would say what I felt the limitations of that work was. So I think it's actually, you need integrity to sort of say what you think as a reviewer, but I would veer against being unpleasant to anybody, because it's not about knocking somebody's confidence either.
Yeah, great, okay. We'll keep flying through these. I think we've got 21 now. So hopefully some of them will overlap.
Great.
Yeah, so again, this is another one about Picture. So this is from Ada on Facebook. It says, I have 2 different series, but the info section only allows for one. What do I do?
So in regards to this, in the main info section, I would suggest uploading your artist bio or like a bit of your CV. Then if you've got specific series, if you've split them into collections, I would add the background on the series into one of the images in the series. So again, you can go, if you click on the image, you can add information to that specific image. You've got a 15,000 character limitation, but I would add that there. You don't want to have too much information because it may not be read. As Camilla said, the reviewers won't be able to read essays and 500 word text. So keep it short, but add them into the specific images in those collections, I would, and then maybe just reference that in your review, just point the reviewers towards that. And you could also add a comment to that image saying background on this series is attached to this image.
Okay, great. So this is from Veronica. She asked, is there an opportunity to share a 2-minute video during a portfolio review?
Yes, so you can upload moving image to Picture. When you share screen in the reviews, we will be going through this in tomorrow's meeting. If you're attending, I would suggest you all do. There is an option to make sure you share sound as well, but we will make that clear. So yeah, you can upload moving image to Picture.
To be honest, it's probably better online than when people are trying to show videos in the usual context. There's a lot of background noise, isn't there?
Yeah.
Great. So this is one. So it says, I am curious on the importance, relevance of introducing oneself, our photographic background, and to talk about our work versus just showing portfolios and asking questions during the reviews.
Well, I suppose what I'm saying is, it's about you articulating your artistic voice. And so, as I was saying through the talk, if you're just showing images, then you're having to do a lot of verbal explaining around the work. And I guess if you're able to write that down in advance and place that with your work visually, so that people, when they first encounter your work, they won't be seeing you face to face, so they'll be able to read about it and contextualize it. As opposed to just seeing the images. But it's up to you how you want to present your work. But as I said through the talk, when you just look at images online, you don't get that kind of placement, that context and that orientation, and it's just quite hard to work out what the work is necessarily about.
Okay, great.
That answers that.
Yeah, I think it's probably important to say that some reviewers might want to know more about the background of your work than others, so it's just good to have it practiced and ready anyway.
Okay, great. So this is one from Cindy. So she put, in Picture under profile there is a box for description. Is that the place for artist statement, bio?
If it's in the info section in your main profile, then yes. This is probably, if you can attend the talk tomorrow at 2 o'clock, we're doing a run through of Picture, so it's probably better for me to answer it then, because we're going to do some screen sharing. So yeah, I would suggest that. If not, feel free to email us if you need some further clarification.
It's great you're doing that session, Niamh. Sounds like it will help people.
There's a few questions like this, so hopefully it'll be a bit clearer then. So another question is whether I can upload a few portfolios, and then she put in brackets 3, and let the reviewers pick what speaks the most to them.
I think that'd be one for Camilla. How would you feel?
I wouldn't want to have to do that work for you. That's what you mean. But I mean, I get what you mean. You're trying to show a variety, and then I guess then they can select what they want to talk to you about. But I think the problem is everybody's very precious on time, and I think if you provide too much information that they then have to edit through, that might be too much. It depends. I mean, it may be very quick to look through it, and it might be quite a simple process of saying, can we talk about that work as opposed to that work? But I like to hear people talk about all their work, and get that sort of overview of their practice rather than pre-editing too much for them.
I think with that one, I think upload them and maybe start showing a select portfolio to your reviewer, and they may just naturally go to something, but I wouldn't give them that work to do. I wouldn't ask them to do it. But I think, yeah, you can have the option if it happens naturally.
Okay, great. This question is from Josh Adam Jones, and he asked, this might also, but in terms of online, should images be presented in folders, stroke projects, or a collection of all works sequenced well?
I think it depends on the work.
Yeah, Picture is going to have a particular structure to it. If you were doing a PDF version of it, you would be able to have a bit more control over how you flow images and how you show images and sequencing. So you would be, I think if you were doing a PDF format, the authorship and the design kind of falls more on you, doesn't it? But I think Picture has more of a structure to it, doesn't it? So I think it would have to depend on, I mean, actually PDF reviews are almost more like the printed format in terms of sequencing and editing. But that's quite, I think that would be quite a great thing to try anyway during lockdown. I know not everyone has much time over lockdown, but actually getting yourself a PDF version of your portfolio that you're happy with, because it takes time to do the layout and sequencing and design. You can bring colour in, you can bring graphic typography in. It might be a really great thing to actually work on and then have it there for different formats. You wouldn't need it for the format portfolio reviews, but I think it'd be helpful for other stuff. I mean, who knows, maybe we're just going to be moving more online going forward. I mean, I don't know, but you know, it could be that we see this model continuing. What do you think, Niamh?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that's going to have to be thought about more. One, it opens up your audiences, it gives opportunity to more people. It takes away the stress of printing your portfolio, which can often be quite expensive. And yeah, I think depending on how we move forward with the pandemic and things, it may be something that just has to be thought about more in future. But
and in terms of curatorial meetings, it might be that people will just get used to seeing things digitally, and we go back. I mean, it has massive advantages for people as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, and we've got these amazing kind of platforms that probably weren't explored in this way, and why not use them? I think with that one, I think that's from Josh Adam Jones. In Picture, you can split it into collections. I'm not sure if you've uploaded yet. Again, you can watch the live talk tomorrow with me and Seb. But yeah, I think it is good to split things into collections so that they're kind of easily navigated, but you could talk about your images as a whole.
Great. Okay, so I guess there's probably just, a lot of people have asked this question. Is it still possible to come to the portfolio reviews on the 18th of July?
I'm afraid we're sold out this year. Yeah, we sold out. When we relaunched them online, yeah, we sold out within a couple of days, which is amazing. But if you haven't been able to book onto this year's, we will have our portfolio reviews again for the Format 21 Festival, which will be on the, oh goodness, that's really awful that I'm forgetting the date, the 12th of March, that weekend, 2021. So yeah, make sure you're booking onto those.
Okay, great. So I think Camilla touched upon this in her presentation. She mentioned a series of questions for you to kind of ask yourself, but Claire's asked, do reviewers have set questions they like to ask?
I think every review will probably be different, and I guess people will probably have their ways of opening up a conversation about people's practice. So I don't know if it could be just within their mind that they just have this set of questions. I don't think you can really predict what everybody is going to want to ask you about it, because it's difficult to know what they're thinking about and how they're working. But if, as Niamh said, they've declared what they're interested in, maybe another way of looking at that is to think about how you could position your work to their interests.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
If that helps.
I think that sounds helpful. So this is one from Katie. She said, do you tend to prefer images to be full bleed, or is there a particular way of presenting you would recommend?
I think that, I don't know how you visually see it on Picture. I guess
how it's, if it's a full bleed image, it will be uploaded like that. If you've added a border to it in Photoshop or in editing, it will be uploaded, yeah, as that JPEG is seen. So I think it really depends on what is important to the image. If it's important for it to be full bleed, if you would like to have it framed with a border and you want to visualize that, then maybe add that in.
Okay, great. So the next two questions I think are quite interlinked, so I'll say them both. So it's I'm a novice who doesn't use like Lightroom or Photoshop, etc., but has lots of ideas. would I still be able to arrange a portfolio review if I think my work has some very real merit? And then there's another question later on, which is related, which is about experience. What if I don't have any experience? Is a review a waste of time?
No. I mean, I think there's the right time to see. There's different portfolios reviews for people at different stages of their career. I think format is a very high profile professional showcase for your work. So I would say to, for example, undergrads, I have seen quite a lot of recent undergrads. I know there's some in the audience, hello. It's useful if you get that opportunity, but I would probably say it's better to do 2 or 3 years out from uni. It's not worth doing one every year. You do it every few years and you'd be quite strategic. If you did one at format, you might want to think about Photo Fest in Houston in America, because you reach a different audience. So you're kind of quite strategic about when you do it. You don't have to rush to do it all at once. But having said that, if you feel you've got something to say with your work and if you want to share it with people, and I don't think the way you take your photographs or how you work has any relevance, you know, I don't think you'd be edited out because of that. If you look at, for example, the National Portrait Gallery's Portrait Prize, there have been winners that have been iPhone photographs. You know, those boundaries have gone. You know, what you use is not going to limit you. So I wouldn't just be underconfident about your work, but then I'd also be strategic about portfolio reviews. It's a good contact base, and be honest with yourself about whether you feel ready. Do you have enough work? Is this the right time? You know, and also you've got to think about where you are with a project. If you're doing a very personal project and it's very close, maybe you need to leave it a little bit of time before you share it with people. So I think it's a very personal, intuitive thing. I don't think there's a set of rules, and I don't think you'd be discounted.
I think it's important to say from the format point of view, like Camilla touched on, I think it's important if you are very right at the beginning of your career and you maybe don't have a lot of work or it's not quite developed, maybe format isn't the best place to start. We do say on our website that if you bought a place and we felt that your work wasn't quite right yet, we may contact you to say we don't think you should have a review. Not because we're saying you're not good enough for format, but it wouldn't be a good use of your time and your money if your work isn't ready to be seen by some of the reviewers. So I think format isn't the only review out there. So if you're maybe at the beginning of your career with less developed work, maybe look at other options to get that feedback and then work your way up.
Okay, great. So this question is from Sue, and it's kind of, I guess, about what you touched on, Camilla, about your approach to discussing your work. She's put, if you're a fine art photographer, how do you present or discuss with a documentary expert or competition? So how do you like talk about the work? For example, I shoot within a certain underground community and my work is more about the energy and emotion. My perceptions of it, that them being about telling a story of the people and the community.
I mean, I guess what I'm assuming you might be saying is your visual language is more candid and less sort of polished, potentially. So if you think about Nan Goldin's work, I mean, no one is going to say Nan Goldin is the best photographer, technically, but she's certainly one of the most important contemporary photographers and artists alive today. So her work is subcultures, communities. If you look at Larry Clark's Tulsa project, similarly, the strength of those projects is that they were taken from a very insider perspective, somebody from the community, of the community, and there's a big track record of that. Now, would you define that as documentary practice? Probably not. But, you know, there's a lot of precedents of people who have used that sort of candid camera veracity inside a community. And it has shifted its context. It can be shown in an art gallery context, but it can also be published in magazines and papers. It just has to be the right magazines and papers. So I think the boundaries are very, very fluid these days. We have photographers who work from a photojournalist perspective who are now being shown in museums and galleries. That wasn't happening 20 years ago. I remember when Guy Tillham, Simon Roberts, Simon Norfolk were really struggling to get their work into fine art context, and now they're in museums around the world. And you know, there's been this massive shift where there's been more fluidity between those two camps, you know. So I think what I'm trying to say to you is I think you would find people interested in documentary work interested in your work as much as fine artists.
Brilliant. Thank you, Camilla. Okay, so next question from Sarah. My work doesn't have titles. How important is that they have them?
I don't think you have to have titles for your work. Some people do, and some people, the text is very important and the combination of caption and image is important, but for some people it isn't. It's absolutely fine to just number your images. And the reason why it helps to number them is just then it's much easier for the reviewer to reference specific images. So if things have not got any sort of title or caption at all, the issue is how do you talk about the work? Because you have to start to try and visually describe the work that you're talking about, and it can just be a bit clumsy. So a numbering system is absolutely fine if you don't have captions or titles for your work.
Okay, great, thank you. So this one's from Claire. She says, if the reviewer goes through picture images quite quickly, is there then the possibility of showing work on a website through screen share?
I don't know how to answer this in the way that how do you, as in, do you feel like maybe if you haven't given enough work and they breeze through it quite quick, I think that's what you maybe mean. There is the option to do that, but then maybe I think this is the opportunity where you maybe upload a couple more backups to Picture rather than having to faff, because you might then spend a bit of time faffing around trying to swap your share screen. So maybe just have the main series that you want to show uploaded on Picture, then have some backup things uploaded in some other collections. And I think that's important to what Camilla, we picked up on earlier about the wildcards, maybe have those there ready.
Okay, great, thanks Niamh. So this one is, what is the difference between a series statement and an artist statement?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I guess an artist statement is an overview of your practice and you generally as a working photographer across the board, and a series statement is more in depth for that particular body of work. So I suppose the expectation is that an artist will develop series that will be quite different from each other. And so you have a sort of sub-story for each series that you work on, as well as an overarching statement for you as an artist. Now, if you only have one or two bodies of work, those two things might be very similar to each other. But in a short artist statement of 300 words, you are really just summing up the core of your practice. If you were going to extend that to 500 to 800 words, you would start to put in series descriptions as well. So the two kind of work in tandem, but that's how I would see it.
Brilliant. I think this question is related. This is probably quite specific to Picture. So it says, what is the difference in content between 150 word description and then the 350 word artist statement? So is that Niamh just what Camilla's just gone through?
Yeah, because you mentioned a few kind of cutting it down, didn't you, Camilla? I think in a portfolio review setting, you don't want to provide 500 word artist statement, because it won't, there's not really a chance for it to be read. I think in this setting, you want to just kind of give a really brief overview of your practice and your overarching themes, and then you can maybe then incorporate more detailed description about series into the info about each work. Would you agree, Camilla?
Yeah.
Great, okay, so still got some questions left. Thank you both. We'll keep going through them, and thanks everyone for the comments that keep coming through. They're really kind comments. This one's from Tanya, and she says, my work incorporates text in the form of short handwritten accounts. Is it okay to include these?
Please do. Please do. And also think about how you would bring that in if you were printing the work. So if you think about someone like, I'm going to get the name wrong, Jim Goldberg, Magnum photographer, did that lovely Polaroid project with people who were living in Greece, and then he got them to handwrite around the edge of it. And so that was how he combined text and image. And it's quite challenging to find ways to do that. So obviously on Picture, you're going to very easily be able to put text and images online together. But maybe just give a little bit of thought about how you would do that if you were exhibiting it. Would you layer the text over the image? Would you have it as a caption? How would you combine that? But I think, I suppose I quite like text. So I would love to see that alongside the work.
I think it's good to say as well that I think in portfolio reviews, people are very tempted to bring this pristine, amazingly well printed portfolio, which is great if that's relevant to your work. But if you do have text and it's important for it to be placed next to an image in a certain way, and obviously it may not be possible to see that in the way you intended in an online review, but if you're able to use Photoshop quite well, you could just put that together in an image and upload it in a way that you would want it to be seen, and that will still be viewed.
And again, this is the sort of thing you can get some feedback on, of different ways of doing it, what's effective, what isn't, you know, get that dialogue going around it if it's something you're struggling with a bit.
I think we're coming to the end, but I think if we try and answer a couple more questions, because we've still got 30.
Thank you, everybody. You've been very patient. I'm glad it's been helpful for people.
Yeah. So there's a question here, which I think has already been answered. It's kind of about what happens if you see how do you judge the quality of work and how you will respond. So also I can skip that one because we've already had that one from Ron at the beginning. And then we've got one here saying, related to the legacy, will be sent the email addresses of the reviewers we see, or if we wanted to keep in touch, should we just can we have their contact details?
So obviously we wouldn't be able to share the reviewers' emails with you without asking them, but I think that's something for you to ask within your review. I think, Camilla, would you be happy with that? How would you want that?
And also I guess some of the reviews will, I mean, I have a website, very poor website, but you know, I would refer people to that because they can contact me directly through it. But people from organisations, sometimes their emails are available. Oh, it was Jim Goldwell. Thank you. I need to look that up afterwards just to make sure I don't get it wrong. I love that work. I'm always referring to it. Thanks for that comment. But yes, it's a good question to ask in a review though, because you don't want to be fumbling around for that afterwards. But sometimes, for example, people might say, contact me through LinkedIn. And that's a useful platform because people will, if you're on LinkedIn, you're professionally available. Or someone say my email isn't. I think there's a contact thing on my website, info@. If it isn't, I'll check and I'll put something on there.
Okay, thank you. So this one is from Patrick Boyd. He says, I'm an artist making 3D lenticular photographs. They don't show up well on the web. What do you advise?
It is challenging, you know, and there's going to be some work that is just going to work much better online than other work, and that is a obvious problem, you know, and I suppose you will have to mull over how effectively you can visually represent your practice within this context. You know, I don't think it's fair to say it's going to be a level playing field for everybody. Because it isn't. There's going to be certain types of work that you really need to experience in a kind of three-dimensional context. So I think you'd have to just be honest with yourself about how well you can convey that digitally.
Yeah, and I think be honest with your reviewer as well. Obviously, this online format is new for a lot of people. It's new for us as an organisation, and yeah, I think, just be honest. And maybe if there's a way you can take a picture of it in as an installation view, that might be a good way to kind of help back it up.
Okay, so the next two questions, just try and get through a couple more of these. I'm just trying to find ones that are related to join them up a bit. So this one is, I didn't end up choosing the reviewers. So she kind of feels she's been a bit mismatched. So for example, there's with my reviews, no social engagements, for instance, in my work. So she's worried that they might wondered, the reviewers might wonder why she picked them. And then this other question is, how likely that applicants, I guess, in future will be paired with their reviewers, you know, when they're announced.
So what was that last question, Laura? I didn't quite, what was that?
So this one, I guess, is how likely is it that the applicants will get to speak to the first 4 reviewers they selected to speak? I
think it depends on, I mean, it's a bit of a bum fight, isn't it, Niamh? It depends on who's the most popular reviewer. Some people get booked up within.
Yeah, we do get that. There is always certain reviewers that get booked up within minutes. Often when the format portfolio reviews especially open, we have a massive flurry of bookings within the first 5-10 minutes, half an hour, and it's like sometimes we feel like we're opening Glastonbury when we're sat behind the screen and everyone's coming in to try and get it. Unfortunately, some people might not get their first choice. We do always say, and we really recommend, go through all the bios a few days, mull over it before the booking opens, write down a list that's more than, if you want to see 4, write down 8. It's not the be all and end all if you don't get your first 4 choices. Everyone has a really, really important view. I think, yeah, just don't be too disappointed. It is hard. But yeah, you have to be quick off the mark sometimes, and just yeah, everyone's got a really interesting input, and everyone's input's going to be very valid. So I think take everything you can get from your reviews.
And on the lady who was asking about social engaged practice and not being able to sort of tailor that, I mean, I would just be upfront with people and just say, I wouldn't say I didn't want you.
No.
but I would maybe say, look, this is my practice. I've read what you do. I'd really appreciate your view on it, but I realise this isn't completely your bag. I mean, I know some people are quite specific about what they will and won't see. I think a lot of people are a bit more broad church, though, aren't they? You know, I don't think I wouldn't be at all anti somebody from a very different practice coming to show me their work. That wouldn't bother me. So, you know, I think most people will be open-minded to make that, as you know, we all want it to be as constructive as it can be for you, basically.
Yeah, I think most people are quite open. It's just sometimes people are very specific, like they don't want to see nudes or things like that. It's very, but it's always kind of pointed out in the bios. So yeah, I wouldn't worry. Yeah, I think we maybe need to wrap up there. We're 4:36, and I'm always aware that people start to drop off after 4:30 because people have children and other things to go on to. But
yes, just one last question, Niamh, which I think a few people might be wondering. So I guess it's the same thing again. It's like, does anyone have any ideas of what could be given to the reviewer or left the reviewer at the end of the portfolio for an online review specifically?
As I think maybe as in your website, I think,
or LinkedIn. You know, I don't want to promote one website over another, but I think maybe now is a time to think about your digital footprint and your digital legacy, because if we are going to continue in lockdown for longer, how are people going to find your work? And a lot of curators use online platforms to find people's work. So it's probably a really good moment to think about that, but it could be Instagram, it could be LinkedIn, it could be a website. Obviously a website is quite a big thing to do, but you can do your own website. It may not be the time to do it, but you know, I think we all need to sort of have a digital trial, don't we? I mean, this is how people find out about everyone's work, so it would be a good opportunity to think about that.
Yeah, I think it is more important now than ever to have an online, and like Camilla said, it's a lot of work to do a portfolio, an online website, and it can be a bit of money. So if that's not possible, Instagram is really, really valuable. And I look at a lot of artists on Instagram. I'm sure most like curators and people in the art world do now, but I think it's important to, Instagram doesn't need to be like majorly curated, but it's and you don't want to see your whole series of work on Instagram. People don't want that, but just to have an insight of your work is important if you don't have a website. Yeah. I think yeah, is that
thanks everybody for your attention.
There's quite a lot of more questions and we couldn't get through them all, but thank you everyone for attending. We are having a break next week because of the portfolio reviews, but we will be returning the week after with Peter Burnell and Simon Roberts. They will be in conversation, and booking will open for that next week, so keep an eye on our website. And for those of you that haven't been able to book onto the portfolio reviews this year, keep an eye on our sign up to the format newsletter, keep an eye on our social media, and more information about the festival for next year and the portfolio reviews, our conference and all sorts, and also our open call will be launched in the coming months and towards the end of the year. But thank you so much, Camilla. Thank you, Laura.
Pleasure.
It's really amazing, and I think we've helped quite a lot of people today, which is really nice, and it's good to see how many people haven't attended a portfolio review and who has. So yeah, thank you all for attending, and yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Goodbye.